Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Get Into It with Gila. I'm Gila Glassberg, your host, registered dietitian, and intuitive eating counselor. And today I have on Anastasia Young. Hi, Anastasia. How are you?
I'm doing well today. How are you?
I'm doing great. I am so excited to interview my own PT. So it's really fun to have you on. So tell the listeners a little bit about yourself. Where do you live and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So I'm an orthopedic and pelvic floor physical therapist. So I treat everything from head to toe, but my specialty is in pelvic floor. I also treat abdominal symptoms as well, pretty much everything, men, women, anything in between. And we'll talk more about that, I'm sure. I service the South Shore of Long Island and Manhattan right now. But I'm a little bit in between places. So we're on 37th Street in Manhattan, if you want to come over there, and currently at Motion Physical Therapy.
Okay, awesome. So you are my PT, so that's fun. So I
Yes.
know we know each other, and I think you're an awesome PT, but I also think you're a bit out of the box. Do you get that a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. People tell me
Yeah.
that all the time.
Yeah, because you're not like your colleagues, I'm assuming. Are you?
No. So in typical orthopedic and pelvic floor PT, we generally stick to a lot of exercise. I tend to integrate a little bit more manual therapy, and we kind of look at the body as a whole when we're treating people. So it's not just like, you come in and you do a couple of bridges and all your symptoms go away. We have to look at what's going on. We talk to the patient about all their past history in order to create the most effective treatment plans for those patients. And everything is very specific in my case. Everything's very individualized.
Hmm. That's awesome. I love that. So could you tell us how you got interested in PT and then more specifically pelvic floor PT?
Absolutely. So I actually have a little bit of an interesting background. I was an athlete. I was a gymnast when I was younger. I transitioned into diving, and then I was on a national luge team for 10 years. So I have gone
What is
through my fair
luge? What
share.
is that?
Luge, the crazy winter sport where you go down and ice shoot on a sled. It's just a single person sport with your feet going first. Most people know bobsled because
Yeah,
they know
yeah,
the movie Cool Runnings. So
yeah.
it's
I do know
very
that movie.
similar.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so I did that for about 10 years. I went to Olympic trials in 2010 and I retired afterwards, decided I want to transition into something else. But again, like I had my fair share of injuries throughout that time. And I found myself in the sports medicine room being very intrigued by everything that the, athletic trainers and the PTs and everyone else around me was doing for rehab and recovery. It was interesting to see different things like compression and laser and TENS units and all these like really interesting tools being used in order to help people recover quicker, right? We had the cold tub, we did a little bit of the hot and cold baths. We did a little bit of everything.
Hmm.
And it was very helpful, honestly. But unfortunately, after you retire, you still bring these, old injuries with you. You still have these restrictions. You have things you manage through life. But I was just curious. I liked everything about athletics. I loved science. I decided to go back to school, and so my undergrad was actually in international business. So I was
Okay.
considering doing some other stuff at the
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah, and so I went back to school. I took all my prereqs and then applied to all these different programs all over Long Island. And I didn't think anyone was going to take me because I had that background. It was a very different background. And I ended up getting accepted to many different schools. My wild card school was NYU, and they accepted me, and I ended up going there. I loved it. It was 3 great years of education there. And when I first went in, actually, I was working at a school prior and as a teacher's assistant. And I talked to the physical therapist that worked in the school, and they said, yeah, you could go into pediatrics, you could go into orthopedic. There's so much you could do with this profession. And that really opened my eyes to it. And when I started doing a little more research, I realized there was this whole women's health section. And that was fascinating to me, actually, because I didn't really know too much about it. So I asked more of the physical therapist. I, started learning more. And I didn't really click into it until my second year in school. And I went out to there's something called CSM, which is a big meeting where all the physical therapists come together for research. And then you can, pick and choose what you want to listen to. So I did some orthopedic stuff. I did some pediatrics. I did some pelvic floor. And when I got to the pelvic floor meetings, I realized that these people really understood what it was that I was trying to look for and achieve in the body. And they understood looking at the body as a whole and, understanding from a, holistic wellness perspective. Not only that, but now we're treating all these things that people are going around and having many different conditions like urinary incontinence, they're having bowel and bladder issues, they're having pain with intercourse, they're having, pain with menstruation, things that the typical system is not doing such a great job in helping some of these patients and some of these people. So it was interesting to me that physical therapy could be such a good tool to help people and get people better so quickly. And a lot of these pelvic floor therapists love Pilates and they like working through the core. And that was something at the time, again, I came up exercising, heavy weightlifting, a lot of power, and we missed that whole component. And when I was in school, you started learning about it, I realized how important it was. So I think between everything that kind of pushed me into the pelvic health realm. And after I took my first continuing education class, I was still in school actually. So we had to learn how to do the whole examination while I was in school. And I ended up loving it. I really enjoyed working with women. And, as soon as I came out, I jumped right into the field and been doing nothing but growing, ever
Yeah.
since.
Wow, that's really interesting. So I feel like you took like your years of being an athlete, and I know we've spoken about that privately. That like you said, like okay, I don't know all the terms, but like the restrictions, like the more you work certain parts of your body, the more restrictions you have, and you need to learn how to like unwind those restrictions. And when you're like heavy on the sports, that's great and healthy for you, but also could be damaging if you don't have a way to unwind the restrictions, right? I'm getting the terminology. Um, so then when you went into more like the medical field, because like obviously athleticism and like I guess sports medicine is different than um like PT, like physical therapy.
Yeah, there are definitely components of it that are very similar. So, athletic trainers I find end up dealing more with direct injury. So they're dealing with more the acute injury perspective. Physical therapists get a little more of the chronic stuff as well.
Mhm.
Not to say that we don't cross those fields. Like we
Right,
absolutely
right,
treat both. But I find that the athletic trainer's job is really kind of if I'm going to overgeneralize, to get people back into play kind of as
right,
quick as
right,
possible, to get
right,
them up and moving, to heal them, to rehabilitate them. And the PTs will deal more with like the other patterns of movement, deal with more chronic things, start understanding how everything's kind of interconnected. But we definitely need each other, in
right,
in
right,
the medical field.
right. So you took like your background in um what's the word? Athletics.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay. And then learning about the pelvic floor PT, because we speak about that a lot, that the core, like, if you don't have a strong core, you don't have a strong body,
right,
right? And then,
absolutely.
yeah. So then you're like, okay, I get that. Like the whole athletics is amazing, but like you wanted to take it a step further and learn from the PT perspective, right?
Absolutely. So it's interesting that we bring up the core because I'm sure everyone knows and we hear about core, use your core, deep core
Yeah.
muscles, but it's,
Activate
I
your core,
think,
whatever that
yeah,
means. No, I'm joking. I know what that means.
exactly.
Yeah.
Whatever that means,
Yeah.
exactly. So the
Yeah.
question is how is that something that what are you actually trying to activate is the
Right.
question, right? And
Right.
when I have patients coming in all the time, I ask them like, what is the core to you? What does that even mean? And I don't think people could even articulate it. They don't necessarily even know. They don't know how to activate it. There are different ways to activate your core muscles. There are different systems in the body. And then if I retract a little bit, so when you're an athlete, you kind of have to move through patterns, right? And there's all these systems in the body that interweave. So you're never just using a muscle on its own, right? Your
Right.
bicep never
Right.
just activates on its own.
Right.
It's stabilizing on something. We have a pattern. We have fascial connections that pull through other muscles. And so it's really fascinating when you start to watch movement, where it kind of all comes back to, like, where are the crossroads of a lot of these different patterns. And I found after working with different, in different environments, I work with athletes when I first came out in orthopedics. I was in a, sports ortho environment, and then transitioned more into the pelvic floor. And there's a lot of similarities here. A lot of it comes back to the fact that we have a whole postural core system that's not being integrated properly, right? And then same thing, what does that even mean? People don't even know
Right.
what that is.
Right.
So I think it's just getting brushed over a lot of the times. We
Yes.
go to our classes, we want to sweat it out. It's just like, yeah, we're going to work on
Right.
our
Right.
core, but
Right.
what are we doing to actually be efficient with it, and
Yeah.
when we're not efficient with it, I'm making a huge generalization again. It's
Yeah.
like that's a lot of the people that end up coming into the clinic to see me, is those people that are not efficient in those patterns. And
Right.
some of the things is some of fixing a lot of conditions is as simple as retraining that postural core system and then integrating it into your movement and integrating into your activities, daily living. And so when people are able to learn to use it better, they move more efficiently, they're in less pain, they have less dysfunction. And then to your point, when we have a lot of restrictions, we're through life, our body brings in different movements, different, like, let's say you roll your ankle, right? So your body learns to stabilize that ankle and move through, because if we didn't, we'd have a lot more problems as a species, to be
Right.
honest, right?
Right.
We'd
Right.
have a whole
Right.
sorts of issues. Compensation is a beautiful thing in the body, right? But the question is when is it becoming a dominant pattern that now is causing dysfunction, right? Does it
Right.
cause pain?
Right.
Is it limiting our ability to do
Yes.
things? And at that point in time, you kind of have to just look back. And again, a lot of this comes back to, where's your stability coming from? Is your pelvic floor being
Mhm.
integrated? Do we even know how to use that?
Yeah.
So we end up, to your point, I don't just treat the pelvic floor when people
Right.
come in. We're
Right.
treating those old ankle sprains
Yeah.
and the neck
Yeah.
pain and the back
Right.
pain and, everything that's been chronic along the
Yeah.
way.
I'll actually share like my own story a little bit. Not like too much of my personal story, but like when you hear pelvic floor PT, it sounds like a little bit private, you know. But I'm just gonna say that's not why I go to a pelvic floor PT. I go to a pelvic floor PT because I exercise a lot and I really hurt my back and I really
Right.
hurt everything. I hurt everything. I hurt my back and I hurt my feet and I hurt my everything. So I went to PT a few years ago and he really did help me. And then when I was pregnant with my last, somebody recommended going to a pelvic floor PT just to help not have a C-section. I didn't end up seeing you while I was pregnant, which was funny because of the wait list, but then I ended up being able to see you. And it was like, it's interesting to see. I think this is really helpful for people to hear that, like, something really funny that happened to me while working with you. Okay, for example, I have a lot of pain in my feet, so I wear orthotics. Now, what did you teach me? That I stand on my toes. So when I came home that day, I said to my husband, I want you to think for a second. Are you standing on your toes or are you standing on your heels? Like right now, what are you doing when you're standing up straight? And he said, I'm not standing on my toes. I'm standing on my heels. I'm like,
Hmm.
I always stand on my toes, probably since I was a little kid. I don't know why that happens, but I always had pain in my feet.
Right.
So, so like, okay, so now like that one part of my body or one system, like, right, is I'm not stepping the right way, is affecting my back because I'm standing on the wrong part of my foot, which is just so crazy, right? And then like when I exercise, I'm also probably doing similar small, like because like they'll walk around and they'll correct you, but there's a lot of people in the room, so like it could be the slightest thing that you're like bending your back a little bit more in a plank or you're whatever it is. So like you've been really helpful in teaching me like these little movements, or like with the core, like when they say in classes activate your core, I don't know what the heck that means. Like activate my core, what do you mean activate my core? Like my core's here and I'm lifting, like, so like the so somebody to walk you through, like, no, you have to breathe a certain way and you have to like, it's very mindful. There's a like a major mindfulness component, like similar to like intuitive eating. Like, like I tell this to clients all the time. Like I know that probably nobody ever said to you, like, what does hunger feel like in your body? What does fullness feel like in your
Right.
body? And they're like, I don't know, like whatever. So like that's all from like childhood. Like they just ate when they were bored or ate when they were tired. Right. So then it's like unwinding that when they're 20 or 30, it's like, oh, I understand why you developed that pattern, but like, is it helping you? So it's like interesting
Exactly.
that like, I mean, I think that all people should have like PTs and therapists and dietitians, and like we would all just be better if we had that like proactively. But like like you are just out of the box as a clinician because like you don't just talk about, oh, this is your pelvic floor, let's strengthen it. You're like, what else is awry or like even slightly off that you could educate, you know?
Exactly. I was very fortunate to have a lot of great clinicians teaching me along the way. So I actually graduated in 2018. So I've been practicing since then. And I have been in different clinics with different clinicians. And some of the biggest things that I've taken with me into my current practice is the fact that we have to find the driver of, what the problem is. So you're coming in with foot pain, right?
Right.
Is it your foot that's causing the issue? Is it because we're not stabilizing in our hips properly? Is it because of our weight shift? And we have to kind of go through each of those pieces and figure out if we change this one thing, what makes the biggest change in your body, right? What is the most efficient piece? Is it a little bit of all those? Probably to some
Mhm.
degree,
Right.
but what is the biggest one? And how can we actively change that pattern as quick as we can for you and in a way that makes sense to you so you can make these changes and integrate them. That's the other thing that I think people forget. So they come to PT and they're learning this stuff. And in the type of PT I do, I spend a lot of time doing neuromuscular reeducation, which is, again, changing those patterns, fixing things, understanding muscle activation, understanding weight shift, understanding your posture, your positioning, all these different things, and retraining patterns that may have caused dysfunction in the past. But when we do these things, it really brings everything together for people. Is there a right or wrong way to move? Technically, no, there isn't. Just the same way, my favorite question, is there a right or wrong way to breathe? Not really if you're getting breath in, right? So,
Right.
so if we're
Right.
not passed out on the floor, I
Right.
don't think there's a wrong way to breathe. But I would argue that because the pelvic floor and the diaphragm work together, if we breathe in a certain pattern, we have more efficiency of our pelvic floor being used during certain movements,
Right.
right?
Right.
And things like that. So it's about reshifting these patterns, understanding what's the main driver, shifting the pattern to meet that, and then trying to get people out of pain. And what's great about it, and when people come to see me in particular, I spend a lot of time taking history. So I will spend the entire first session just talking to people, tell me everything that's going on head to toe, because I want to know all the previous injuries. A lot of people think things are not relevant, so they'll omit them. Eventually, we will find them down the line,
Right.
I
Yeah.
promise.
Yeah.
I'll be like, hey, what happened with the ankle? Oh, by the way, and
Right.
it's
Yeah.
that's the type of stuff that I try to get the first session because again, it's what's going on in the entire body. What happened with old injuries? How did we get to the point that we're at right now? And maybe pelvic floor dysfunction, if you will, whatever it's presenting as, started after you sprained your ankle because you fell off that curb,
Right.
4 years ago, because you started having, one or two drops of leaking with coughing, sneezing, jumping. And because it wasn't bad enough, you're not thinking about it. And
Right.
then, it turns into full blown incontinence. And then
Yeah.
that's when you step in my office 4 years later and you say, hey, I don't know why this happened. It came out of nowhere. Another,
Did that really happen?
big phrase.
You sprain your ankle and like it's
You
so
can.
and
It's happened. I have countless stories of people coming in with very interesting progressions of pelvic floor dysfunction. But a lot of people think that you only can get this after, giving birth, after being pregnant, and it's just not true. Men, women, and children can have pelvic floor dysfunction.
right.
So we actually do have. I don't treat pediatrics, but there are pediatric physical therapists that specialize in working with kids. These are kids that are sitting on the toilet for, an hour trying to have a bowel movement. They can't have a bowel movement. This is the kid that is constantly going to the bathroom every 2 seconds with urgency. This is the
Right.
kid that is having like severe constipation. This is the kid. Usually we see a lot of kids with constipation. This is the kid
Mhm.
that's wetting the bed at night. This is
Right.
it's all
Right.
these pieces that you already are looking at pelvic floor dysfunction. And again, because it's so close to the genitals, and I think people it's a little, we don't want to talk about it outwardly
Sensitive.
because of
Sensitive.
that,
Yeah.
right? But what is the pelvic floor? It's just a set of
Right.
muscle. That's all
Right.
it is. And I think if we start normalizing that, people will start to catch things earlier and will be a little bit maybe people be, they'll want to go get these things checked out earlier because of that. But, you know, it depends. Everyone's different.
Is it like, do you find that that's more in my community? I know you work a lot with the Jewish community. Do you find that that's more in the Jewish community, or it's like in like the world at large?
It's not the world at large. I think what's cool about working in the Jewish community is there are a lot, at least the people that come and see me, really care about their bodies. They're into holistic wellness. So I find that they're almost more knowledgeable about the topic walking into the door than maybe the next person because they've heard about it from their friends. They're talking about it, with whoever, and someone says, "Hey, oh, that's going on. Maybe you should go see a pelvic floor therapist,"
Right.
And so
Yeah.
they're already coming
Bread.
in being like, "I think
Bread.
I have
Yeah.
stress
Yeah.
incontinence." And you're like,
Yeah.
"Okay, yeah, you might." So,
Yeah.
mhm,
That's so funny. Things in the Jewish community spread like wildfire. So if you get like, you find like a good niche, whatever,
exactly.
you're golden. So what would you say is like the most common reason why people come to see you?
Yeah. I would say currently my caseloads, I have a lot of incontinence. So it's a lot of people leaking with coughing, sneezing, jumping, running,
That could be female or male.
laughing. Yeah, both. Tends to be more with females. I'll tell you why, because we have anatomical differences, right? So even just by looking, if we, make the urethra case simple, we have a very short urethra that goes straight down to the ground, and men's urethra goes through some extra tissue. And so because of that, they have a little bit more closure that happens along the way. Women, we don't really have that. We just kind of have to hold up a lot. And so I think when we have any weakness in our pelvic floor, we start to present with more of those symptoms more frequently than the men do, if that makes sense. But I do see it
And
in the male community as well. It's more common in older guys after they've had, some prostate surgeries or they have some other things, but it's not the only time that I see them. Women tend also to have a lot of urinary urgency. So what is that? It's going to the bathroom, every half hour, 2 hour throughout the day, running to the bathroom, not having a long urination stream. And what's so crazy about it is those two things tend to be easier to treat than they aren't. There's a lot of lifestyle,
right.
that we can change first. And I find that, the first, especially with urgency, once it turns into an incontinence, so urgent incontinence is a little different than urgency because you're leaking your urine on top of it, right? That's what we call the key and lock syndrome. It's like, oh my gosh, I have to go to the bathroom, and then you can't do it quick enough, and you start to go. And so once it gets there, obviously we're doing the same lifestyle components. We have to talk about why that's happening. But I would say it's such a common thing. Other things that are really common that I think people don't realize are related is, the long bouts, the constipation. And even if it's not active, people say, "Oh yeah, I've been constipated for 10 years." And you're like,
Wow.
"Okay, so
Oh, wow, that's so
maybe
cool.
it's
Yeah.
sitting on the toilet and pushing for,
Yeah.
30 minutes and not being able to go to the bathroom properly, that now you've caused some dysfunction in the skeletal muscle, the pelvic floor, and maybe it's not holding the right way because of all this, right?
Right.
So these are all things that I keep in the back of my head when I'm seeing patients, and I try to screen as much of this as I can when I see them the first time. But, you see how it is in the clinic when we come
Right.
in, they only give us a half hour, which
Right.
is insanity. It's just too much to go through. So whatever we don't get through the first day, I have a good idea of what I want to start working with. And then we start to dive deeper and we start asking more questions. We watch people's movement. That's another thing. A lot of people like exercising, and maybe it's none of those things. They're like, "Well, I don't know. I'm just leaking when I'm coughing. I can't exercise anymore." And then I watch them do a squat and their knees are buckling in towards each other, right? And you're
Right.
just like, "Oh boy, how many squats are you doing in your classes?"
Right.
And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and lunges and step
Yeah.
ups and
Yeah.
jumps and etc.
Yeah.
And that gives a big window as to, hey, what's going on? We have hip rotation
Yeah.
dysfunction. We have
Right.
to strengthen the hip because
Right.
that is causing some of these pelvic floor issues as well. So it's those are the common things that I see. That's very,
Who
yeah,
would have known? Who would have known? Like,
right.
yeah. So wait, I have a question just on this topic. Like, you are so comfortable talking about these things, and I know just because like you're my PT, but also just from all our conversations, like you clinicalize it, like which is nice. How
Yeah.
like is that? Is that like natural for you, or like did you have to work on that?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I mean, when you first come out practicing as a pelvic floor therapist, they kind of give you basic tools. Like that's the biggest thing with being a PT that I think, I love being a physical therapist. I love my community. Um, I think some of us could do better at synthesizing data and using our tools. Not everyone, but I try my best to be able to look at a case and really, again, deep dive. What is the number one thing that could be causing this problem, right? And so if you really think about it first, then you have all these other tools behind you. So now it's like, okay, so there's the exercise component, there's the manual therapy, there's the nervous system piece, there's working on stress
Mm,
eating, right?
right.
Water intake, and we could
Yeah.
talk all about that.
Mm,
It's being able to see through and see the pattern, and the patterns that you see come with treating more people, So it's
yeah.
if you pay attention to them, you start to see, hey, that person with chronic constipation that has not been drinking water because they haven't been now has urinary urgency because they're dehydrated.
Right.
Right. And it's like, and then you tell them, hey, I need you to drink more water. And they go, but I'm already going to the bathroom 15 times a day. And I said, trust me, it will
Right.
help, you know?
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, so hearing stuff like that, it's like, again, the more that you treat and you see from different perspectives, the more you can create those, synthesize those patterns. And when people come in, you say, okay, I see pattern A, pattern B, pattern C,
Mhm.
which is driving what, and then to the point of I can't treat everything on my own. And it's great knowing someone like you. It's great knowing acupuncturists
Right.
and chiropractors and
Right.
whoever else and, DOs and wherever. And I
Right.
could send people out. So I'd say, hey, I really think you have this thing going on. Maybe we need to connect with someone else in
Right.
order to either rule that in or rule it out, right? Or
Yeah.
to, make our treatment better and more efficient that way. It's about trying to get people better as quick as I can. That's the tough thing about holistic wellness. And you know this probably more than anything. It takes a while to see changes in the system. And it's
Right.
even worse when you have chronic stuff going on,
Right.
right? So there's a little bit of that buy-in component that we need to help our patients see and help people that we're working with see that this stuff really can help.
Right.
It's not strap in and do, 3 months of exercise and
Right.
then we'll see where you are on the other side of
Yeah.
it. It's like, let's
Right.
make the change today. Like,
Like
let's
slow and
do
steady
something that
though.
you see
It's slow
today.
and
Yeah,
steady. Yeah. It's slow and steady wins.
exactly.
It's like these are small changes, but you have to do it and you have to keep at it and you have to be patient. And that's hard because we want like quick fixes.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have two questions that I thought were interesting. Okay, number one, can you tell us a little bit about like some cool things that you use while you're practicing? Like just some things that come to mind is like I hope I'm allowed to say this, but like when you're massaging tissue, like maybe this is where you store certain emotions or like,
Yeah.
yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah. So once we start getting into the emotional perspective of things, these are higher level classes in like the visceral, the cranial world. Anyone that's done those types of therapy, will understand those things. But I think if I had to simplify it, the fascia, that's the big connective tissue that winds around our muscle, our bone, it kind of helps us communicate things in the body. It helps us move. It helps us, I think there's a component of it that, and there's a lot of nerve endings in fascia, right? So it's like there's a piece of it that responds to our environment, right? And our body, there's a big thing in the chronic pain world that, our body is responding to things. It's trying to protect us. So when people come in, they have chronic pain, level 7 out of 10 every day. It's those systems are overactive. And when you look at it that way, it becomes very easy to shift things and to start treating it. Doesn't mean it's going to happen quickly, but then it's like, oh,
Right,
hey, this is something achievable. We can do this. It's not out of my control. I don't know what's going on. So I think there's a component of it that and again, there's not a lot of research done on this, which makes it a little bit, again, I'm a little bit off
yeah,
of what typical physical
yeah,
therapists may
right,
see, but there are pieces where it's like, hey, let's take something simple. You rolled your ankle. Now we're in the fascia around, some of the muscles in the lower leg. And we have this holding pattern where no matter how much trigger point and massage you do, it's just kind of not letting go. And so maybe around that time you were stressed because you were running around like a crazy person, you weren't paying attention, you rolled the whatever is going on. So that stuff probably in some form is also related into that injury, right? And so and even afterwards, it's like you are trying to heal, you're trying to move around, you're trying to push through things, you're still stressed out, the baby's crying, I have to do this, da, 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 da. And so it's like, how does that make you feel?
Mm.
Overwhelmed, right? And so maybe there's a component of it that when we start to treat it again, you start to bring up these old emotions of feeling overwhelmed. There is a concept of like what we call energy cysts and things, and that is more in like the visceral cranial world. It's when you catch these pieces of things where someone's fine, 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 you're treating them on the table, and out of nowhere, there's like an old emotion, an old memory pops up, an old trauma, an old something, and they just start bawling for no
Mm.
reason. And we don't know why, and it's like, and
Does
then
that
they'll
happen a
start
lot for
talking
you?
about stuff. It can happen. I find that a lot of people hold a lot of emotion in their abdomen, actually. I have an interesting, I'll give you guys a story that happened, but it's fascinating when you're treating like intestine and you're treating stomach and you're working on motility and mobility. These organs, again, there's a lot of fascia. There are a lot of nerve endings in our abdomen, right? The more they're starting to understand about that gut brain connection
Right.
and
Right.
what's going on here, and you could probably speak more to that than even I can, to be honest. But I had a patient a long time ago, and I'll consolidate this story. She came in with chronic constipation. And it was interesting because as I was working on her, I was trying to figure out where the main restriction was. We're using the general lifting, the local lifting, all the techniques I've learned through the visceral therapy world. And I kind of came about a couple of these places, maybe in her large intestine, small intestine. I don't remember exactly where I was, but I remember putting my hand on the area, and she starts talking to me about her kids, right? And the way she's kind of talking to me about her kids, I don't know how old they are. I'm guessing they're like 12 or something, like 10. They're like young, and I'm like, okay, and she's a lawyer, she got a stressful job and whatever. And so she's
Mm.
like, yeah, my kids love doing this and I like doing this and whatever. And I was like, okay, I didn't think anything of it. The next session I saw her, I started working on something and we had a big release in the tissue. And she started to, tears were coming out. I was kind of like, okay, like we could go slower. Are you okay? Is everything okay? And then she started telling me this story about like 10 years prior, how she witnessed this guy have a heart attack and die in front of her. And she didn't know how to handle the situation at the time because whatever, she was frozen. She didn't know CPR, whatever the reason was. And her kids were, around that age of how she would talk about them all the time, right? And then I thought about it because then she said something else. She's like, "Oh, my son's graduating from college." I'm like, "Wait a second. Didn't you like where are we? Is your kid 12 or are they, in their
Yeah.
20s?" And it was so interesting because just by treating that one area, it brought up all these old emotions, things. And again, that constipation had been going on for 10 years, probably happened right after the fact that she witnessed this pretty traumatic event in her life, right? And so we start working on that area and all these emotions come out with it. And it was just, I've seen it in so many different ways. So it's just an example, but yes, I do believe there's capacity to hold emotion in tissue. I don't know if it's through the nervous system or,
And
in
did
these,
you
these
believe that
pieces.
before you saw it so clearly with your clients? Like before, would you have believed it?
I am a massive skeptic. So I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
absolutely not. When I learned about this stuff, funny story. So when I first took visceral therapy, I was a third year student. And the reason why I got into this world was because I happened to be at CSM. I was talking to other physical therapists. They were ranting and raving about Gail Wetzler. They were like, she's the best, she's the best of the best. She's like a master in the visceral world. She's a great pelvic floor therapist. She's treated stuff that no one else can treat. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I'm like, how can I learn from the best and how can I be better at my craft? And I walked into this, 4-day class of a lot of manual therapy. And I just remember it was like, okay, put your hands on someone's head and tell me where the restriction is. And I almost walked out of the class. I was like, this is not for me. Like, I don't know what's going on in this class. But then when I learned to fine tune what you're
So
feeling
cool.
for, I was like,
Really cool.
okay. So it was funny because I had a young therapist like myself working with me, and we're like putting our hands on the head, and we're like, I don't know, is it the liver? It's the liver, maybe it's the liver, right? And I felt like it was, like they talk about maybe a Ouija board's not such a great example, but it's kind of like you're kind of influencing the people around you because you're like, I
Right.
think it's the liver. You think it's the liver? Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
liver, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I said, maybe what we should do is let's grab the people all the way on the other side of the room and have them do the reading. Don't say anything to them. Let's see if they come up with the same stuff. And they start coming up with the same areas, which I was like, okay, there's something here. We just can't figure out like what's going on here. So when you start learning more about that, you start seeing this, you see people react to certain things, you start learning like the more energetic feel of the tissue. Um, you know, I become less of a skeptic as I go on. We'll just
Right.
say.
It's really interesting because like I mean there's all this research in the therapy world about like how the body keeps score, but like
Yeah.
to see it physically, like with manual massage and like to see it, let's say I don't know what exactly you're releasing. I think restrictions. I think I understand, but
Yeah.
then to have somebody like I kind of have that sometimes with my clients when we're talking about like, you have to be very intuitive to work in these fields. You know what I'm saying? Like you have
Yes.
to kind of like read the room, but like let's say like you're having like such a neutral conversation with someone about dinner time and then like they're frozen and you're like it could be anything. It'd be like, did your parents not have enough money for food? Like, was there no such thing
Right.
as dinner in your house? Or like, did your parents struggle with, depression and she never made dinner? Like, and it's like you don't they didn't weren't even thinking that, but like something hit a nerve and like, it's just so interesting how like we're so complex as humans and like there's
Yeah.
so many layers and layers and layers of I don't know what's going on.
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of it that we still don't even know because it's hard for us to quantify some of this stuff. So that's
Right,
what I always tell people. I'm like, just because there's no current research done on these
right,
topics, my question is, how do you measure it? Like,
right,
how am I supposed to measure it to make a study about it? Right. And
right,
that
right,
becomes the thing. So I think if we find better ways to measure these things, aside of just questionnaires, which I think can
right,
only give us so much information, but have something more objective, I think then we start to see that. And I think they do have that in pieces. If I remember correctly, it's either in the visceral or the cranial world. And I don't remember if they use magnetics or I don't remember they used or light or heat. There's something measuring temperature. I don't remember. I have to go look back for the article. But they were able to kind of replicate some consistency there, which is
right.
interesting.
Yeah,
So there is a piece of it that I think we don't know enough about. Maybe people don't care to research it. Maybe,
right,
and not everyone can feel it too. To your
right,
point, it's like I'm a different type of practitioner because when you get into the pelvic health world, we're not just treating people for their pelvic floor condition, right?
right,
It ends up being a lot of other stuff that comes with it. You spend a lot of one-on-one time with people. I know a lot about people's lives. Like
right,
most of my patients that come in, I have more information about them than probably the next person does, the
right,
next
right,
practitioner, because you have to know that stuff. You have to know the things that are stressing that person out. You have to
right,
understand the things that they're struggling to do. And when we're talking about that area that's so private for people, other
right,
private details start coming out, And
right,
so I think it's important that we look at that and we say, hey, there are emotional components of stress. And when you're stressed out, you may be grabbing your pelvic floor. You may be
right,
shrugging your shoulders to
right.
your ears,
Yeah,
and maybe
yeah,
that's causing some of the pain you're having, right?
right,
And that's where like having an integrated environment to treat is really the most ideal situation. So it's like working yourself, myself, with maybe someone that's a social worker that and then you like blend all these things together. That's where people could really, get the most benefit, I think, out of treatment, and not just focusing on one component on its own.
yeah. This is so interesting. Is there any other stories that you would want to share that, or like maybe like daily tips that people could do to strengthen their core, or things they might not know that would make them feel better?
Yeah. So if we talk about strengthening our core, it's interesting because I think most people know what a Kegel is, right? We've heard
Yeah,
that
that's a big
terminology.
one. Yeah,
Yeah. And if we don't, I will tell you if you try to hold your urine or you're trying to squeeze like you're holding gas or something, that's the pelvic floor muscles that you're trying to activate. Some people know it by if you start to urinate, then you stop the urine stream.
hmm.
Don't do that more than one time, please, 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 because then you're going to be in my office because then people are like, oh, I do it all the time. And I'm like, oh gosh. And then
So you're not into
everything gets all
Kegels.
out of whack.
You're not into
Yeah.
Kegels.
Well, no. Kegels are very important. It's understanding what the Kegel is and understanding there's a difference between gripping and grabbing muscle and using something functionally, right? So,
Mm,
yes, is it functional to be able to stop your urine flow? If you're leaking, sure. Yeah, you need to do that, right?
right,
Because we need to make it to the bathroom. If maybe you're in public and you're feeling a little gassy, you might not want to let that gas out. You might want to walk around. So
right,
yeah, there's plenty of function
right,
there.
right.
But I would say, the one of the main functions, the pelvic floor is support, right? So that's
Right.
in most really good pelvic floor places, you're going to see people going through a lot through posture. There are
Hmm.
some facilities that don't even do internal work until they do a whole round of
Right.
posture first,
Right.
because there really is a big
That makes
supportive
sense.
connection.
Yeah.
And I always tell people, I'm not anti-Kegel, but do you squeeze your pelvic floor when you're going up and down the stairs? Do you
Right.
squeeze your pelvic floor? You're not actively doing it. It's kind of happening on its own, right? It's part
Right.
of the process. And I think that's the piece that it's hard to distinguish what that means. So if we think about breath too, that's another, pelvic floor has a lot of different functions. So breath's another one. Our diaphragm sitting here on the lower rib cage and our pelvic floor is low. They kind of work together in this like some pump action, right? So if I breathe in, everything kind of goes down together. And when we breathe out, especially with force, so if I'm breathing out like I'm blowing out birthday candles, or we've done many times H breathing, and that'll
Right.
bring us into Pilates and gyrotonics in a
Yeah.
second. But as you're breathing out, we can actually get that pelvic floor to lift with us, right? And that's more the way that we work because we breathe when we're doing movement, right? So when you
Hmm.
go to the gym, there's always, hey, breathe out when you do
Right.
this, when you do that particular movement, right? Breathe in into the bottom of the squat, breathe out as you're pushing out because we want to engage the pelvic floor a little bit more. So I think there's a piece of it that if everyone's looking to learn about, how do we get the pelvic floor to activate? Honestly, working on taking big breaths in, big belly breaths, getting the pelvic floor to expand and breathing out, even with just a regular pursed lip breath, until all that breath comes out, you start to feel your waist narrow and your pelvic floor start to lift, right? And
Right.
so that's a good way to strengthen the pelvic floor as well, right? Because it's about the components of how it works functionally in our posture and how we're moving and how we're bending down and picking things up. So if you start working from your breath, a lot of the times that's the number one thing I work on with patients when they come in. We will spend sessions working on breath because once we understand that, everything starts to fall into play after that. So we don't have to sit there and be like, okay, now squeeze your pelvic
Right.
floor and do your bridge, and squeeze your
Right.
pelvic floor and do this,
Right.
and it's just not the way we work. You're going to breathe out and move, right?
Right.
And so when you start to do that, then you start getting more strengthening, right? So that I think is really important for people to understand.
Yeah. That's so interesting. Any other like stories that you wanted to share? I mean, you're always sharing really interesting
I
stories.
know
So,
I'm trying to think of a good one off the top of my mind right now.
yeah.
I think, if we're talking about, well, what types of people do you have listening here? Maybe I can make something more specific.
Yeah. So my clientele is what I'm gonna guess is mostly women around my age. Well, I would say maybe like give or take like 20, like 10 to 20 years older than me, and then maybe 10 to even 20 years younger than me because I know some teenagers that listen. Um, Mostly Orthodox Jewish women, but not all. And
Yeah.
yes, a lot of us are having multiple kids, and
Yeah.
that's a big talk about, strengthening your pelvic floor and yeah, basically like
Okay. PSA, all right? You don't have to wait until you have your first kid to do pelvic floor work. So
yeah, that's good to know.
please get in before you can see a pelvic floor therapist prior, especially when you're younger. Before, I would say there are red flags to, pelvic floor tension and things like that. Leaking is for sure one. So I have
Mm,
some teenagers that leak, especially my athletes, especially people that do a lot of heavy lifting, gymnastics,
right,
power, a lot of
right.
jumping.
Hmm.
That's a red flag. Pain in your abdomen or pain, like severe cramping with menstrual cycles, another one. Get in to see a pelvic floor therapist, okay? If you've dealt with any significant amount of stress in your life, we've had trauma, anything like that, you might want to go in and see a pelvic floor therapist as well. So there's a big asterisk on that because it depends
Yeah,
on where that's coming from,
right,
obviously. But
right.
a lot of people do grip and grab in their pelvic floor and their lower abdomen and may not even realize they're doing it. Anyone that has constipation,
Mm,
right? We're talking chronic. Anything chronic we consider over 3 months in most
Right.
articles, right?
Right.
So once we're over 3 months, go see a pelvic floor therapist. Work on this stuff before it turns into a problem.
Right.
My women that can't use tampons, get
Hmm.
in to see a pelvic floor therapist, right?
It's cool
Because
from, sorry to interrupt you, but it's cool from like,
yeah,
let's talk about constipation for a second as a dietitian, right? So, um, you could treat that in so many ways. Like, what are you eating and how are you moving, right? Because when you move, your bowels move. That's a big thing that we learned in school. But also, let's say medically, somebody would treat that with medication, right? But like then
right.
they're just not changing their habits, or they're not changing their, yeah, like let's say they should be eating more fiber, or drinking more water, or let's say you would teach them how to, I don't know, probably change the way that they're moving in general. That would help them go to
Right.
the bathroom easier. So it's like you could take a medication, but like you're not really fixing the problem.
Exactly. And once we get into constipation, it's always multifactorial. There's always more than
Right.
one person working on it at the same time. I always tell people half of it is what's going on above the pelvic floor, the other half of it's what's going on at the pelvic floor. So you
Yeah.
have to check both pieces.
Right.
I have a lot of young, here's another one that I know could be a little controversial, but if we have any history of eating disorders, that's another one. You might want to go see a pelvic floor therapist because again, it's all these other components that now have contributed towards maybe tightness in the pelvic floor when we didn't have it. We may not even know it until, especially in this community, women are getting married, they go to have intercourse for the first time, and then they just can't because it's
Right.
so painful, right?
Right.
Or they know it's going to be a problem. I have a lot of women that come in to see me and they're like, I'm not getting married yet, but when I do, I want to be ready for intercourse the first time. I want to make sure it's not painful. I've heard it can be painful, and we work on it together,
Right.
right? Based
Mhm.
on where they feel comfortable. So I never am one to say, hey, we have to do all these things. Some people
Right.
don't want to do internal at all.
Right.
Some patients
Mhm.
want to do internal, right? And it
Right.
just, everyone's a little different. But we could handle a lot of these pelvic floor tensions and components just from doing things like breathing a lot of the times, right? So again, if they can't work directly with me or we're losing time working together because of insurance or whatever else, I will send people out to do Pilates, right? I love reformer Pilates. I think it's great to help learn to stabilize and keep the spine stable and work, on all these
Mhm.
different smaller movements and smaller muscles that, get overloaded a lot of the times with bigger movements. When we go to the gym and we're exercising, we use a lot of gravity and we're using it for cardiovascular capacity. And
Right.
it's like we're not always paying attention to our form all the time, especially
Right.
when the
Right.
instructor's like, all right, let's do another 50,
Right.
whatever, squats and jumps and whatever. And
Yeah.
so you're just like all ramped up. But I think that's cool about Pilates is that you get to slow things down and really work on your form and figure out, hey, am I really stabilizing the whole way through this motion or am I losing it halfway through? And that's what's causing, some of this other stuff. Gyrotonics is another great one. Not so available as much as Pilates is. It's a little more three-dimensional. You'll see dancers training with it. I started doing this almost a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. And it has been a life changer for me in my body with all my old injuries and working on spinal health and joint health. And again, learning how to be very specific with the way that you move. And all these components goes back to, again, that posture, that alignment, everything like that. And
Mhm.
what's cool about it is that if you have all these things going on, usually a little bit of input goes a long way. Right.
Right. Right.
So even
100%.
between what we've done, we
Yeah.
don't need to do something excessive. Sometimes, again, to the point of like, we may just work on breath for the day and
Right.
you get up off the table and you're like, wow, I feel like I'm 2 inches taller, and I feel better in my body. So
Right.
I think that's really important that if you can't get into a PT for whatever reason, at least exploring things like Pilates and gyrotonics. And I'm not anti-yoga. I like yoga too, but
Yeah.
I find it to be very hard to be honest because you really have to stabilize in your
Right.
environment. Like you don't have these tools to help you move.
Right.
You have
Right.
to do it all in your own body. So
Right.
another one like mat Pilates is harder than reformer Pilates. Yoga, I would say, is right up there with mat Pilates. It's very hard to do, and to do it the right way. So especially if you go to a class and the class is overloaded with people, you don't have
Yeah.
someone watching your form the whole way
Right.
through.
Like something that you taught me that I think is really valuable that a lot of people don't agree with me when I tell them, but like when I go to the gym and they say do a plank, I do it on my knees, and I'm thinking like I'm such a cheat because everyone around me is like trying to do it on their arms or their forearms, but I'm like, no, Anastasia told me that this is bad for my back, and just because I don't feel it as much as my in my core doesn't mean that I'm not exercising, right? It's hard because we're so, I
Right.
think in the gym we're so conditioned to be like just push, just harder, and like I really did pull something in my back once, and I had a pinched
Right.
nerve, and I really did hurt myself. And another thing that I'm just thinking as you're talking is that I speak a lot about like body positivity and feeling good in your body and how like yes, some of us will never feel like 100% comfortable in our bodies or like the way that our bodies look, and that's a lot of diet culture and stuff like that, but like feeling physically comfortable in your body like is so important. So if you have chronic pain, and especially if somebody tells you, well, you have pain in your knees because you're overweight, or you have pain in your feet because you're overweight, or because you have pain anywhere in your thumb because you're overweight, right? So there's just so much body hatred, like, well, it's my fault if I would just lose weight, and like that's
Right.
not true. So like these little things, they're big things that you have taught me, like it really does help that I don't have chronic back pain and that I don't
Yeah.
have chronic pain in my feet, even though sometimes I do, and it's because I wore the wrong shoes. At least I know
Right.
that, like, I could step on my acupressure mat and I could
Hmm.
whatever, all the things that you taught me. Or I'm going to go to Anastasia tomorrow, so she'll teach me something new. And it's like, it's cool because it's very integrated. It really does go hand in hand with what I teach people. So it's really, really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that you say that too, because again, it's about there's a I'm gonna go back to what we feel in the gym. A lot of the times when we work out, we've learned to understand what compressive load feels like in our joints, and we think it's a good thing, right? So you're
Right.
like, I need to feel that. I need to feel it working. I need to, and
Yeah.
actually, when you start to learn to elongate and to create space between the joints, what does it do to your movement? It makes it easier. It
Right.
makes it freer. You have more
Right.
mobility, and you're like, I don't feel like I'm doing as much work
Right.
doing this simple body wave or something
Right.
because now you're supporting yourself, right? And so I think we've been conditioned. You want to talk about being conditioned with certain things, with exercise, to feel that compressive load is
Mhm.
really the only way for us to feel like we're doing anything good
Right.
in the
Right.
gym. And
Right.
that's just untrue. It's just untrue,
Right.
right? When you feel more supported and you feel freer, it should feel easy to do 10 push-ups,
Right.
right? You should feel it in those
I'm
muscles.
getting
You
there.
shouldn't feel it in your
Right.
back and in here
Right.
and in your
Right.
quads and wherever else it's
Right.
going, right? Because
Right.
you're just grabbing and trying to push
Right.
through. It's
Right.
like you
Right.
need to learn how to support your system. And a lot of that comes back into learning how to control your pelvic floor and to learn to stabilize your spine properly. And
Right.
that's, I think, is really important because there's not just physical therapy and in all these different types of holistic spaces where we're working with the body, a lot of it comes back into the spine, right?
Mhm.
And you
Mhm.
some people just treat through the spine, right? And
Mhm.
some people don't. And I think it's really important to notice that that alignment, really can change the way that you feel in your body. They could change whether or not you, right? You could be overweight by standards of what, yes, there's certain things that we talk about with BMI, and there's certain things, and I'm sure you've had that conversation with, in other podcasts, but some of that information's a little outdated because I'll tell you something funny. So as an athlete, I at one point in time remember going in when I was 16 years old, I was like a rock. I had so much muscle on my body. I stepped on the scale. My doctor looked me in the face and said, I'm overweight and I need to lose weight. And I just looked at her and I'm like, where? And at 16, right? Like, and like
Right.
most people have been like, oh my
That's
God,
sad.
like,
Yeah. It's
and I
really
was
sad.
just like, are you serious right now? I was like, I am all muscle. I was like, yeah, maybe I have a little fat on me, but this is not like, I'm not, whatever the weight I was and,
It's
whatever.
very
And
boxy the way that people treat. It's like it's such a small biomarker of height and weight. BMI is height and weight. It's like what?
exactly.
There's so many other factors that go into somebody's health. It's crazy.
Exactly. And muscle weighs more than fat. So now you're
Right.
going to tell me that I'm fat because I'm a
Right.
muscular person. Like that's
Right.
it. And she just like didn't synthesize. She didn't care.
She
She
didn't
was
even
just
look at
like,
you. She
no,
didn't even look at you. She was just like, I'm just gonna check the box. I told her she's overweight.
exactly.
I did my job. Yeah. It's really sad.
Exactly. And it's frustrating because like I'm the type, as you can tell, I have a little spice to
Yeah.
me, but like I'm
Right.
not the type of person that would be like, oh my God, she told me that. Like, what am
Right.
I supposed to do? I was
Right.
just like, no, I don't believe you. Get out of my
Right.
face. I'm never coming back to you. Right.
Right.
Like, because
Right.
I
Well,
was like,
thank
this is
God, because
ridiculous.
imagine
Right.
if like that could have really like messed you up.
Yeah. Of
That
course, because
right?
now you're hearing it from a doctor that's
Yeah,
telling you that you're
exactly.
overweight. That
Right.
can easily get in your head for sure. And so the point is that those standards have changed over the years. there's more data coming out that's saying, hey, that's not really the way. Because again, I think some of that original data was made in a very certain subset of
Yes,
people. And
100%.
so they're taking it and applying it to what our current population is. And it's just, it's
Not relevant.
outdated, it's
Exactly.
old, it doesn't make sense,
Arbitrary.
right? So
100%.
yeah. So there's a whole thing on that. But my whole point is like, just because a number says something, I'm not saying that there are other reasons why I'm sure you've gone through this, but being overweight is not great for the body because of other stressors it puts on the body. But if you are carrying a little extra weight on
Depending.
you,
Yes, dependable. It's
yeah,
depending. You can't just say anyone overweight is unhealthy. You can't just say that. You can't say that.
exactly. That's
Because
exactly it. No, I agree. I 100% agree with you. It's again, it's like how you're presenting. It's what do your other numbers look like? Like I
right,
know some people that if they stepped on the scale, they have a certain number, but their
right,
cholesterol actually doesn't look horrible. And then the
right,
person that's skinnier, their cholesterol's through the roof. And you're like,
right,
well, who's unhealthy here, right? So
right.
that's
Exactly.
always that question of where do you draw that line for health? But yes, there are studies that do show that like being, and I'm sure you know this too, but like if you're overweight for long periods of time, you are at more risk for developing certain things, right? Do you develop them is a different question. We don't know
Right,
what
right,
pieces, you come into that. I don't know. But the whole point about why we're talking about that is because you don't have to feel bad in your body when you're doing it. You could still
right,
move. I have,
right,
what if you're really heavy, what do we do as PTs? That's like,
mm,
okay, we got to put you on the treadmill. We got to
right,
exercise. When we need more cardiovascular capacity, we need to
right,
work the systems that are not getting enough work or are being
right,
overstressed in order
right,
to help you, right? But if you feel like garbage doing those things because you're not stabilizing properly, you don't want to do them.
right.
Right. And so that's really important from my perspective. I don't look at people. I'm like, well, you're overweight. That's what we got to do.
You're
It's like you
foggy.
look at
Yeah,
them.
you're
It's like,
lazy. Like, no, like, yeah, exactly what you're saying. It's like so much harder.
exactly.
Yeah,
And then you have to ask people, how do you feel in your body? What's hard
right,
for you to do? Right. And some people will say, hey, I have a really hard time going up and down the stairs because my knees are hurting me.
right,
And so, yeah, maybe the weight component, there is something. I remember there was an article that says like every X amount of pounds creates X amount more force on your joints. Right. And I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. Another one I wish I had right here.
yeah.
We could just cite them as
You
we
can
go.
look it up if you want
Um,
afterward.
we'll look it up. But it's an interesting study, really. But then I would counter argue and say, hey, do those people know how to stabilize properly?
Right,
Right. So
right.
maybe if you're strong enough, I'm not saying that, you should be really strong, but look at these guys that are these big bodybuilders. Look at these,
Yeah,
what do they call that? Where they like throw the logs and stuff. Like these guys are like big
right,
guys. And you could look at them and say they're overweight, but
right.
they may not hurt when they're walking around. They might,
Yeah,
it's like, did they lose mobility in their joints? Did they
right,
lose stability places? They
right.
might feel fine. They might
Yeah,
have completely healthy blood work. Like we don't know
exactly.
what's going on. And I think it's
Right,
unfair to make an assumption from an outside perspective to say that that person should be in pain, that they should be
right.
this, they should be that.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
That's really why I love you because there's so many clinicians out there that, I mean, I know, and I'm like perfectly fine sharing this that like I think I'm considered obese, right? And like I eat nutritiously and I exercise and I always say like weight is
Right.
not a behavior and I did just have a baby and whatever, but like my blood work is fine, my blood pressure is fine, like I'm in a totally healthy range. What a doctor might look at me and be like, no, you're not because you're overweight, you're obese. I'm like, okay, but I'm healthy,
Right.
right? So it's like
But
you can't judge health. You can't judge somebody by the way they look.
exactly. And I think it's all about how all remember, it's a piece of the component. So it's like
Right,
there's weight, there's, the blood work, there's movement, there's this,
right,
there's that, and it's
right,
about how it all comes together. And to the point of like, yeah, maybe if some of these things are high, you should monitor them more frequently, make sure they don't get worse, right? Like
mhm,
that's important. But some people I know that like they're fine. They're going through life. I'm not saying that I'm not making a PSA being like, yes, get overweight. It's healthy
right,
for you. This is not what
right,
I'm saying.
right,
I'm just
right.
saying
Again,
that I think it's not as simple as saying like lose weight and everything
right,
gets better. And it
exactly,
just isn't. It just
right,
isn't. Because you could
right,
lose weight and still be in pain. You could see,
exactly.
you're like, my back
Yeah,
still hurts. Like
yeah,
what's going on there, right? And the doctor told me I had to lose 20 pounds. I did it. I feel a little better, but I'm still in a
right,
lot of pain.
yeah.
Then what?
Okay, this was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming
Yeah.
on. Where could people find you if they want to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now, if you'd like, I will share my email. You could attach it in the
Yeah.
chat. So
Mhm.
it's younghealth Young health PT at gmail.com. You can email me that way. Just because, like I said in the beginning, I'm all over the place. I'm all over
Yeah.
Long Island. I'm in the
Yeah.
city.
Yeah.
I have some changing things going on in life
Yeah.
right now. So
Yeah.
until I'm a little bit more stable in certain areas, that's the best way to reach out to me. And then if I decide that that's something that requires more of a conversation, then we could, share other information. I could call you and then we could talk about where the best place for you to go. And if I can't see you for whatever reason, because again, I'm pretty busy, there's a lot of stuff going on, then I will try to direct people into the right way in order to get the right treatments. But yeah, that's the best way to reach out to me right now.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, and I will actually see you tomorrow. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. See you
Thank you so
tomorrow.
much.
And
I appreciate it.
okay, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun.
Of course.
Okay, bye.